Hey everyone, welcome to Red Flags and Warning Signs in Adults. Probably one of the most uncomfortable ways you're going to spend an hour. So I'm going to do everything I can to help this feel a little easier than it might be for you, but no guarantees. This is just naturally really tough stuff and can bring up, our own histories personally, and then also as we reflect on our lives. And if you're employed and working with kids or adults in some way and families, some things you might have missed. So I just want to say that at the top, and I'd like you all to do something with me if you're willing. If we were in a big group of people, this is really more fun, but I'd like you to cross your arms in front of you like this. Okay, got that? Okay. Now I want you to cross your arms the other way, which is actually a skill I don't quite have. So the other arm, I guess, on top. So you got that. So the second way, welcome to our time together. A lot of this is going to feel kind of awkward and uncomfortable. Maybe not for everyone. Some of you I know are already pretty know a lot about this, but anyway, I just wanted to say all those things. So before we get started, some of you know me, some of you don't. So I'm going to give you like the 30-second story of me, and you can learn the whole shebang on my website, Birds and Bees and Kids. So I am a parenting educator, and I'm also a sexuality educator. And I was a sexuality educator for a really, really long time. And then when I had kids, I realized I didn't know how to talk to kids. And so I I learned all about how to do that. And then I also have a master's in adult education. So I just combined those two things. And as I was developing my curriculum, I realized I was going to have to talk about sexual abuse and learn about sexual abuse, and I did not want to do that. So I had a little moment where I was like, how can I avoid this? And when we're talking about sexuality in children, we can't. So I actually ended up delving into the world of childhood sexual development. And so that led me into kind of through the back door, learning about sexual abuse and, warning signs in adults and that sort of thing. So, and I am an expert in sexual behavior in children. And so what we're going to look at today is part of that. And unfortunately, it is the hardest part about childhood and sexuality. I wouldn't put these two things in the same sentence because I'm a very sex positive person, and I don't want this to be considered like I don't need to say this, but it just seemed weird to me to say that. So I'm going to stop talking. So let me see here. What is going on? Sorry. I hate not having anyway, never mind. Okay, so this is what we're going to look at. We're going to look at, I'm just going to give you my definition or my preferred definition of sexual abuse. So we're all on the same kind of, coming from the same point. The next thing we're going to look at is statistics. I just want to give you a snapshot of what's going on and in terms of childhood sexual abuse. So, and what happens with molesters. We're going to look at warning signs in adults. So these are like precursors to actual abuse. They're signs of grooming, but there's always a little bit of an overlap. Then we'll look at full-on red flags. These are those things where you're just like, check it off the list, get that person out of that kid's life, get that child help, which means actually reporting the person who is doing the grooming or the actual abuse. I'm also going to share a story with you that really nicely illustrates the whole process of grooming all the way through abuse. I'm just going to tell you now, it is not graphic at all, so don't worry about that. I don't want to fully traumatize you. Today I don't want to traumatize you at all. And then we're going to look at, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about another webinar I have coming up that is covering sexual behavior in children and teens. And then we'll do Q&A. So before we get started, I just want to acknowledge a couple of things. This is really hard. This can be triggering for some folks, so please take care of yourself. Today and while I'm teaching, it's being recorded, so you can watch the recording later if if you want to and you need to start and stop her for whatever reason. The other thing is that I'm well aware that I am a white woman. I'm cis. I use she, her pronouns. I am mostly hetero. I live in liberal-landia, Seattle. So I'm liberal, I'm secular, and I'm American. And all of that influences how I see the world and my perspective on sexuality and in general. And I'm a very sex positive person. That's my whole perspective, that sexuality is a positive, wonderful, kick-ass part of life. So I believe that my job is to be very aware of my values and perspective, and also to teach you research and evidence-based information that's going to help you help the kids in your care or the kids in your life. And, you know, I believe we all share one big value when it comes to children, that we want every child to be healthy, happy, and safe. That's why I do what I do. I love kids, and I only made one because I only love to make so many children and have an immediate one in my life. So he's 19 and out of the nest. So anyway, and like I said, discomfort is part of this. So please, please take care of yourself. And if you have a question or something comes up that you're like, oh no, I need more help with this, please don't hesitate to email me or call me. When I'm looking at, and when I'm talking to folks about something that could potentially be sexual abuse, I don't charge for those consultations because I think it's unethical. All right. Let's see. So we'll be breathing as we go along, and you're going to see these lovely signs of nature. And so that's your cue to take a big, deep breath. I feel like we're probably going to need 75 deep breaths, but let's just do another one. All righty. And I'm using notes, so that's what's going on when I'm looking down. I'm not checking my phone. So one of the things about child sexual abuse is that it knows no boundaries. It is in everywhere. It's probably in every family system. It's in every city, town, country, continent. It is a great and horrible equalizer. And because of this, and the kind of the good news is that often the grooming and the red flags are the same no matter where you are. So it's pretty universal in that respect. And, you know, bottom line is that I really, really encourage you to put your big girl or your big boy panties on. And if you have someone in your life, or you know someone that is exhibiting signs of grooming or abusing a child, that you actually get the person help. So we'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. All right. So this is my definition of sexual abuse. It's sexual activity with a child by an adult. I can't see my whole thing. So by an adult, an adolescent, or an older child for their own sexual pleasure. So this means that the person could have, just to kind of detail out this a little bit. So with a child, it could be an older child, a bigger child, a child who is developmentally more mature than another child. The teenager or older child might be a babysitter, so they have some kind of status. And also when it comes to kids and sexual behavior, there is developmentally appropriate sexual behavior. So sometimes that the behavior may be developmentally appropriate, but it's still traumatic to the child. And then any kind of problematic dynamics. And again, this is usually between children. Besides sexual contact, it also includes non-contact, such as voyeurism, flashing, and then any kind of communication via any kind of device. So one of the things about this is that, yes, the abuse can be agonizing and traumatic for the child, but it also is very confusing because it feels good, and they usually love and trust the person who is not being a good person. So it's really complicated. And this is one of the reasons it's so important to get kids help sooner rather than later, is that it gives them time to recover and to see themselves in a different light with regard to their sexuality. And we do know that children who get help with sexual abuse before they're in puberty recover really quickly. They go on to lead healthy, happy, relationships and sexual lives. So that's something to be aware of, because the sooner the child gets help, the better. Things get a little rougher as kids get older and are into adolescence and puberty. Let's see. Okay, so I want to talk about grooming. So grooming happens when a person creates an emotional connection with the child and with the family to make them relax and become more comfortable with them. And then also it makes the child more vulnerable to sexual abuse, because they're trustworthy, they're a good friend, they are so great, and you feel good around them, but that it makes you less, it brings down your awareness in terms of like any kind of funky stuff they might be up to. So sometimes we get these words confused, like get things confused, like, is grooming sexual abuse? And yeah, it is. It's the precursor. And so usually the grooming happens on site. So I teach this to groups of folks who work with kids. So we're often looking at like what's happening within the organization. And we're particularly looking at potential like coworker troubles, but also out in the world. So on site just generally means like they have direct access to the kid, maybe in the home, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's at school, maybe it's at like a before and after school program. So that's where the grooming usually happens. The abuse, the actual physical abuse, usually happens off-site. So they gain access to the child in some way. So we'll talk about that in more detail, both of those things in more detail in just a minute. Oh, look, kittens. Let's breathe. All right, one more. If I were a true egalitarian, I would have puppies as well, but I don't. I'm a cat fan. So my webinar, my slides, my cats. All right, so I want to give you some statistics. So some of these are going to be familiar. Like most folks know, especially folks who work with kids, that about 1 in 4 girls and about 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused, or molested before the age of 18. That is sometimes not really clear to people. 94% of the time, the person is known to the family or to the child in some way. It's usually the family 94% of the time. In my universe, that is all the time. And then the other curious thing that these are the same is that 94% of kids tell the truth. So what this means is if a child says, Uncle Creepy touched my hoo-ha, believe them. Believe them. Don't believe Uncle Creepy. Don't second guess. If a child says something like that, then you need to believe them. And frankly, as some of you may know, this can cause a total shitstorm in the family and in the whoever's or the adults around the child. But your responsibility, and I believe every adult's responsibility, is to the child. It's not to the other adults. The adults are going to do what the adults are going to do. Only 80% of cases get unreported. So this means a child says, something like, Auntie, my babysitter touched my penis, and then the adult doesn't do anything. They don't report. So that means only 20% of the time it's reported. And there's a variety of reasons for this. The main one is disbelief, not wanting to cause a fuss, history themselves of sexual abuse, and basically just being chicken. So a couple other things. Girls of color are most vulnerable. They're most vulnerable to just about everything. So for those of you who are working with girls of color, really tune it up, like pay more attention to their relationships with teenagers, older kids, and older adults, because they're more likely to be taken advantage of in this way. And there's a host of reasons for that. And I think most of you can probably just connect the proverbial dots. Let me see if there's anything else here. 80% of abusers are male. And then 90% of people who sexually abuse children use child pornography, or I'm sorry, just straight up use porn, which of course, again, is not really a surprise. So the stats are ugly. The stats are ugly, and this 1 in 4 and 1 in 6, that's not true. Like, we don't get the reports that we need because it goes unreported and people don't tell. And I know all of you, some of you may have that similar experience. So the thing about these folks is that they look and act and smell just like everyone else. That idea of a person who molests children being like creepy looking and sort of like half homeless or whatever, that's actually a myth. They are trustworthy. They tend to be somewhat attractive. They fit right in. And this is how they make their way into families' trust, basically, and into, frankly, employers' trust as well. They're usually they're very well liked. They're very well liked. All right. Oh, look at me. I know, I'm like all about the breathing. Here we go. All right. Did you know that when you breathe, as your brain calms down, you can actually learn more? That's one of the reasons why I do this, because I want you to learn as much as you can. All right. So here is the first rule of dealing with adults and this kind of stuff. Trust your gut. Trust your gut. Your gut is very rarely wrong. And so if you are interacting with someone and you have this like, this doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. If you're talking to a kid and they're telling you about a relationship they have with someone, either real or these days online, and it feels funky, trust your gut. We are taught to quash our gut and to stuff it down. Our intuition is very, very, very accurate. So believe your intuition. And if you need to check with another adult that you trust, you can check with me. And if you have a history of abuse yourself, sometimes those folks' barometer for this stuff is a little out of whack, which makes a certain amount of sense. So again, it would be an opportunity to talk to a trustworthy adult. And if you have that feeling and you think something's going on and you report that adult, and then it turns out that that was not, it was actually not happening, that can happen. That happens. And to me, it does not matter. That grown person will deal with this. They'll function, whatever. The most important thing is that child is believed, because if somebody does molest them or abuse them later, they'll know that you believe them and will get them help. So yeah, I mean, again, just don't worry about the other adults. They are not the priority. The priority is the child. The child. All righty. So I'm just curious, we're going to talk about red flags and warning signs, but I'd love to know like what you already know. So if you want to pop some of that in the chat, that would be awesome. And we will discuss it a little bit. And let me just make this bigger so I can see it more better. There we go. There we go, there we go, there we go. So what do you know? What signs and warning signs do you know, or red flags do you know? Not a one? All right, I'll help you out because that's my job. So like I said before, like these are signs of grooming, but they're also, you'll see like an overlap with actual signs of abuse. So some warning signs are an adult or older teen that doesn't have good boundaries. So they may touch children, like a kiddo may say, a person may say, hey, that person may say, hey, do you want a hug? And the kid will say no, and then they'll hug the child anyway. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. They may refuse limits, which is kind of the same thing. So if a child says, don't tickle me anymore, they may continue to tickle them. So they push the boundaries. Someone who walks in on kids when they're in the bathroom. So this would be a whoops, sorry kind of moment, which of course happens, but you kind of want to watch for repeat. Somebody who an adult that shares personal information for a child with a child, sort of like a confidant, like might say, oh, I had a fight with my girlfriend today and I'm really sad, or just offering that personal information that wouldn't necessarily be something that a typical adult would share with a child. Secret interactions, so with teens or children, so this can happen online because they can start texting each other. That person can text them, they can talk with them through gaming. You know, nobody makes phone calls anymore, but that can happen. Or emailing a lot, just like a pursuing that person, but secretly. So it may be overt, like, hey, don't tell your mom or dad, or it may be covert, where it's just happening covertly, and they might say something to keep it secret. Sometimes they don't, because it just feels nice and fun to the child, so the child doesn't reveal that that's happening. Is anybody who arranges alone time with kids? So they try to make it happen, and then they insist on it. They're like, hey, you're like, an example is a coach who just said to the parents, your child is like a brilliant, potentially brilliant batter. He's gonna be on the Mariners or whatever, but I really need to have some time with him alone and do some special coaching. And insisting on that, that's a red flag. And sometimes, again, like, these are warning signs. It does not mean anything's going on, because people are like, don't get this, right? Like, that coach may legitimately think this kiddo is like going to be a superstar and really does believe that they need individual coaching, but sometimes not. And usually there's more than one thing going on. That's the other sign. So outside of work contact, so they connect to the family in some way, so they gain access to the family, like inviting them over to inviting them over for, like, the family invites them for a barbecue, and they come, and then they become a regular part of the family social life. Another example of that was a teacher at one of the local elementary schools here, and he was the life of the party. He DJ'd the parties the moms had, sort of a well-off elementary school. He DJ parties. He was super fun, so he had a lot of access to the families. And so he was trustworthy. They're easygoing, so they're really fun to be around. They're really easygoing. They don't necessarily enforce the rules. They just let things kind of roll. Any kind of sexual joking with children present. So making a comment about a woman's breasts or something in front of the kid, in front of a child, or making any kind of sexual joke, like an innuendo or something like that, in front of kids. And then the last thing is the child sexuality. So what this means is lots of curiosity about, oh, she's in puberty. She's getting breast buds as her period started. Wow, his voice is changing. Talking about that. Are they dating yet? Like, asking, kind of really asking questions about it. And then the other thing too is that it's usually targeting usually a teen, and it's one teen in particular. So if you have a couple kids in your family, and one of the family members is overly interested in that child and curious about their sexual development, and might even interrupt their, like, if they're dating someone and you're at a family party, and that uncle might, sorry, it's not, it's 90% men. We'll talk about women too, but they might try to get in between the couple in some way. So let me see if there's anything else. So did I miss anything? I like Lisa, child acting uncomfortable with them, weird touching. Yeah, totally weird touching, for sure. I think that's pretty much everything when it comes to just the warning signs. And I'm just going to check my time. Okay, cool. And I'm going to drink some honey and water, since I'm not used to talking all the time anymore. Stupid COVID. All right, so really take a breath. And as I said, please don't beat yourself up if you're reflecting back and you're seeing an adult in your life that was behaving in this way. Like I said, it could have been completely innocent and they're just being stupid. It could have been nefarious. There's no way you're going to know unless you had, like, full-on data. So please try not to beat yourself up. And if that person is still in your universe, if you feel comfortable, either talk to them about it, or if you, as we get through the red flags, they need to be reported, then please report them. Alrighty. Okay, so here come our red flags. So these are like, get help, right? If adult needs help, keep the adult away from the child. And then of course, if there's a combo pack, you're gonna probably need to report. So what we see, so a couple things, if they're confronted about this stuff, they may completely be like, you know, they won't get defensive necessarily, but they will definitely have an explanation. So don't fall for it, because this is the stuff that's not typical. So the first one, it's really concerning, is this ignoring social cues. So it's kind of like it's the boundaries thing. So really ignoring social cues. This is usually on purpose. Oftentimes the person will have a special friend, so they'll target one kid, and that kid gets special attention. In a childcare or school setting, that person may change from year to year. So this year it's this person, next year it's this person, but they have a special relationship with that child. So I used to work in before and after school when I was in college, and there was a girl, Emily, and another one, Sapphire, and I loved them. I tried not to show them favoritism, but I did. But they weren't quite a special friend, but they were leaning that way. And frankly, if I had been a man, it probably would have been trouble. The next thing is gifts and compliments. So the person gives gifts to the child, maybe gives gifts to the family, talks about how the child is so amazing, lots of compliments to the child and to the family. That's one. Rescuing a single parent. So this is very common. Single parents, as you may know yourself, are just completely overrun and have tons and tons of stuff, things on their plate. They don't have enough time often. So this person might step in. Remember, they're trusted. They look and smell like everyone else. And they might step in and say, hey, I am happy to take your daughter or your son to, their piano lessons or swimming lessons. I'm happy to babysit them while you go blah, blah, blah. And yes, sometimes people are genuinely like this and sometimes not. So again, this is like a gut check thing. If it feels too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. Spare time with children. So there was a mom told me about this. There was a guy in the neighborhood, and he was like, in his 20s, and he loved to hang out with kids. They would come over to his house. He had all the latest gaming stuff, and the neighbors would just let them go over and hang out with him. And so that's what he did for fun. So just a quick little question for y'all. Did you hang out with kids for fun when you were in your 20s? Probably not. You probably were in some role with them, and you probably got paid if you were working with kids. And so just again, pay attention to that. And also, if they don't have same age friends and they're hanging with kids a lot, that's not good. That's not good. All right, so again, like this encouraging secrets thing. So this idea, like we have a special relationship, we are, you can't tell about our relationship, you can't tell about this touching, you can't tell about this, really encouraging the child to keep whatever's going on the down low. They often will also link sexuality and aggression. So this is not going to come up necessarily with the child, but it'll come up in their language and in conversation with other adults. So you want to, like, you're listening for words like whore and slut and anything that's derogatory like that. Also in terms of derogatory conversation about LGBTQ folks. So if it's like aggressive and basically gross, then again, your gut, like that's a red flag. Obviously it uses child porn. And then the last one is this, describing children using adult-like sexual words. So like talking about a girl and saying she's sexy, or a boy's a stud and they're like in high school, and then talking about like, oh, you know, like playing doctor, kid stuff, playing doctor, or dating, and just talking about teen sexuality, that's all a red flag. And so those last, I mean, the porn thing, the last two things, those are actually going to happen with other adults. And then the last thing is this, which I didn't put up there. They minimize their behaviors. So when confronted, they'll deny it. They'll talk about how harmless it is. They'll say things to make you feel better and to trust them, right? Their whole thing is making the adults around them trust them. All right, so I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna give you an example in a minute, but before I do that, is any think that needs clarifying? Or anything you'd like to add? Because I know y'all been around the block. Did I miss any red flags or warning signs? That would be super helpful to all of us. Oh, hang on a minute. I'm missing a slide. Oh yeah, let's do this. Okay. So this 11% is the percentage of teachers who would confront a coworker. 11%. That is not enough. Again, there are a bunch of different reasons for this. Usually they have to do with not wanting to mess up that person's life, also not wanting to get involved, not trusting their gut and trusting what they're seeing to be problematic. And, you know, confronting a coworker directly is pretty rough. So it's a good idea to bring somebody else in. If they are exhibiting total red flags, and unless you're the boss, that is not your job to confront them. Usually you can get the police involved and handle it that way, because the child will need to be interviewed by Child Protective Services, et cetera, to gather the information. But if it's a warning sign, if it's a warning sign, then you can talk about that. If we had more time, I would explain to you how to do that. Anyway, so let's do this. There we go. That's what I was expecting. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you a story, and this is something that happened at the Boys and Girls Club here in Seattle, and this was all in the news, so, and I have, so it's okay for me to tell you all these details. So here's what happened. So there was a 16-year-old girl, and she told an adult at the club, that she had a problem, and she didn't know what to do about it. And she said that she and a coworker had been in a relationship, and she wanted to end it, but she didn't know how. He was 28 and she was 16, so that's a high school sophomore and an adult. And again, did you hang out with college teenagers and children when you were that age? Maybe you are that age. I don't think you did, and I don't think you do. So what happened is that they started exchanging texts and phone calls, and then it stopped for a while and started up again. So I'm actually I'm gonna tell you what's happening here. So that was out of organization contact, which is a no-no, and then also special attention by having that one-on-one texting relationship. She would also help him with special projects. So he would set her up to do special things and that other kids weren't doing. And so this is kind of in that special friend category, and then special treatment. He gave her a ride home at one point, and the other staff knew this happened, but they didn't say or do anything. So that's out of work contact. Another coworker saw the girl in his office regularly, which was not a typical thing for the Boys and Girls Club kids. So she didn't trust her gut. Then the girl said she began meeting him in secret, and her parents found out about this, and they banned her from having any contact with him. But that was about it. And then later on, the parents discovered that she'd continued to have contact with him and continued to exchange text messages, plus seeing him, at the club. So this would be encouraging secrets, right? This whole texting thing is happening in secret. He was highly trusted, Everybody loved him. He'd been an employee there for a long time, and he was a great coworker. So this was hiding in plain sight. This was hiding in plain sight. And then at one point, this is kind of my favorite part of the story. At one point, he told his supervisor that the girl had kissed him against his will. They had encountered each other on the street and randomly, and she kissed him. So he was covering his butt and kind of minimizing and trying to get ahead, right? To get ahead of what was going on. And so after that, he was warned to have no contact with her at all outside of the club, but he kept it up. And she eventually told this adult, and he went to jail. And with this story, clearly he was very sneaky, very persistent. But when you look at the adults who kind of caught wind of what was going on, I think at the time they told me there were 4 adults who each one saw something, heard something, had that like, uh-oh, this ain't right. And none of them reported it to their boss. And if they all had, even if 2 of them had, that guy would have been out of there and prosecuted, and that girl helped. So if you're working for an organization, make sure everybody knows that if you suspect a behavior that is out of norm for an adult dealing with a child, that it gets reported. It actually protects everyone, because if people are hired and they know that you're highly trained and that the rule in the, one of the rules in your organization is that you automatically report suspicious behavior. So he was super sneaky, and he fooled everyone, and he went bye-bye in the best way possible, off to jail. I want to talk about women for a minute. So yes, they do abuse children. Mary Kay Letourneau, as y'all may recall, raped and molested her student. He was 11 when she first did that with him, and they went on to be married and have more children, and she got, anyway, just completely don't get it, but I do get it, but I don't get it. Anyway, so for women, they're usually opportunist molesters, and they take advantage whenever they can. It's usually older kids and teens, and sometimes for part of them, they're kind of like reliving high school. So maybe they didn't have a great high school experience, and then here's this teenager, and so then they can relive that. They'll act as peers with the child. So the way they communicate, what they do, is all kind of teenagery or matchy-matchy. They fall in love with the person, with the child, and then there's a lot of secrecy around the relationship. And sometimes it is just sex. That's it. It's just sex. And so that's what's going on with women. And sometimes it's all the other stuff, the same kind of pattern as men. But I just thought that was really interesting, just in terms of their like what's kind of going on psychologically. So they may know they're doing bad, but it feels very like normal relationship. So anyway, it's all this is creepy anyway, in my mind. All right, so let me see what else we got. Oh, you know what? So let me just talk about this, and then let's have some questions, and we can all unmute and do that because I think it'll just be more efficient and more fun. So, so I'm just going to back up here. So my hope is that some of your takeaways from this are that you have more clarity in terms of what to look for, that you'll be able to more quickly get a child help, and to also be empowered to like do something and say something. Once a child is molested, they are actually, for whatever reason, more vulnerable to having it happen again. I think it's probably something like, this is not quite right, but like they smell right to those guys. So there's something about them, the way they behave, that kind of cues the person that they're a child they can more easily take advantage of. And, you know, I understand it would be just really hard to report someone who that you know and love and care for, who's been a part of your family, or is a trustworthy teacher or person in the community or coach. That is a very difficult position to be in, to report them, because you will get flack for it. You will get flack for it. Just the nature of that person in their community. People will side with that adult. There were people, the Boys and Girls Club, that totally sided with him. That teacher at the elementary school, there were people that were like, oh no, he'd never. Oh, and I'll tell you what he did. He bumped into a former student at some kind of sporting thing, and they were chatting, and he said, you know, would you like to volunteer in my classroom? And she said, sure, because why not? And she was 7th or 8th grade. So she started volunteering in his classroom. And then she started getting anonymous Facebook messages. And he was saying things that were, you know, of a sexual nature, like, you're so beautiful, you're so sexy, and said something about she was his Lolita, which is a story about a girl who's 14 and has a relationship with a man who's much older. You're like my Lolita, you know, all this flattering kind of sexual stuff. And then the last thing he said to her, so meanwhile, she's like, what is this? This feels really weird. And then the last thing he said to her was, do you know who this is? And she said yes, because she had figured out, and she told her parents what was going on. So he had groomed her and was heading into abusing her. And the other thing about him, again, remember, he's super popular, everyone loves him. He did not have her go through the proper volunteer channels, and had her in the classroom, and people knew he was in the classroom. And so because she didn't go through the usual channels, the principal and I think the assistant principal all got put on leave for basically screwing this up. So don't be afraid to be the person who is the one who does the reporting, because you're going to save a child, and maybe whatever, the grown-ups, as I've said. All right, so we're gonna do questions in just a second. So let me just talk to you. I know somebody was curious about sexual behavior in children, and so I didn't talk about that today. But I do have a webinar on August 13th. It'll be recorded, so if you can't join it live, you'll be able to have access to it. And it's about sexual behavior in children. And I basically look at what's typical and developmentally normal. I help you understand what's not typical, and give you basically a script, or not a script, but what's the word? A tool, there we go. A tool to help you pretty quickly discern, is the child's behavior, is it okay? Does the child need help? We look at how to correct a child's behavior in a way that's kind and firm and keeps you in connection with the kiddo if you have to talk to them about their sexual behavior. I also teach you developmentally what's typical, so by age group, so you really get a sense of what you should expect. And for those of you who are working with parents, especially parents of young kids, they have a lot of questions about like what's normal, what's not. So we really get that cleared up. This is actually my main area of expertise, and it's like I said, it's like my back door into sexual abuse prevention, because my belief is that if you know what behavior is typical, then it's a lot easier to see what a sexual behavior that's not typical or adult-like. So that is coming up on the 13th, and I'm just going to pop there's that information. So it's on the 13th at 10 a.m. Oh my goodness, that's not what I meant to do. Oh, look at that. There's nothing to share anymore anyway. Oh yes, there is, sorry. Good Lord. All right, sorry. I got into the beginning. Ugh. Hi, technical difficulties, anyone? Sorry, I just want to make sure you have this information. There it is. There it is. Okay, back at it. So let me put the link in the chat. Sorry. Can it go? I don't know how to make it go. Anyway. So anyway, so it's $129, and if you use the code BIRDS, it's 20% off. And I will email this along with the recording. So if you're working with children or parents, this is the place to really help you help them understand what healthy childhood sexuality looks like. And so it's a 90-minute session because there's so much to cover, and there's a big fat handout with it, and I think that's it. Okay, so that's that. So let's do your questions. Let me see. Where are we going here? What am I gonna do? I'm gonna see you all. So if you'd like to unmute and ask questions, that's totally fine. It might probably be easier since it's just a handful of us now. So any curiosities, anything that needs clarifying, do you wanna check? If you wanna check somebody's behavior, I'm happy to do that too. Just trying, nobody had any questions? All right. Let me see if there's anything I missed. Because I shortened up my notes. So yes, there's something I missed. So one of the things that you can do to protect children, and this is really for parents to do, is to make sure that they have comprehensive sexuality education starting at a really early age, including conversations about consent and how, and safe touch and that sort of thing, and adult roles and teenager roles, so they understand, it's not normal for someone who's 20 to have a friendship with a 10-year-old unless there's some kind of other relationship going on. One of the reasons people don't get that connection between sexuality education and sexual abuse prevention. The relationship is that a child who knows that sex and sexual touch and romantic relationships are for later in life, that kids' hearts, minds, and bodies aren't ready for that, they're safer, especially if their parent is talking to them, because that also establishes the parent as a safe person, a trustworthy person. So if something's going on with someone in their privates, they're going to be more likely to talk to you. The other reason is that when folks are doing comprehensive sexuality, they use the correct names for private body parts. So it's a lot easier for a child to communicate. So there's an old story about a little girl who came up to her teacher and said, "Teacher, Grandpa touched my cookie." And the teacher said, "Oh, sweetheart, you should share your cookie with Grandpa." And the girl's like, "All right." So she came back like a couple days later, same thing. "Grandpa touched my cookie." Same thing. "Oh, honey, you should share your cookie." And then the girl tried one more time and said, "Grandpa touched my cookie" again. And finally, the teacher said, "What do you mean by cookie?" And the little girl pointed to her crotch. So if that little girl had said, "Teacher, Grandpa touched my vulva," instant help, right? Instant help. So we don't need to shy away from using the correct terms with names for private body parts with kids, because it's about communication and safety. And children have to tell an average of 7 times before they're believed. So don't be that person. If a child says, "Grandpa touched my hoo-ha," then believe them. I get that this is uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, for me, it's all about kids. It's not about adults. I think we have a duty to children to protect them. I know you think that too, but for so many reasons, this is such a hard area, and it's so rampant. We really need to step it up. And I know some of you are mandated reporters. So what that means is if you suspect abuse, report. So please do that. If you're working directly with children and you don't have a system of documentation, you need to make sure that's in place. You need to write down everything in terms of child's behavior, everything they say. If they start talking about a new adult in their life a lot and something feels off to you, definitely probably want to write that down, inquire with the family. And again, this is not perfect, but the more information we have, the better we do, and the safer kids are. All right. So I'm gonna leave it to you. If you want to talk to me, I'm right here. You can unmute yourself if you have more questions. Otherwise, we're just going to wrap her up. Okay, I'm going to give you another minute. All right. Okay, then we'll call it a day. Oh, thank you. Oh, you're welcome. So again, I'm going to send you a handout. I will send you the link to this sexual behavior training with the coupon code. And please be kind to yourself. Please be kind to yourself today. Like I said, this can get stuff stirred up. And don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have a question about an adult or a kid. This is my job. I'm happy to help. And I just want to say thanks so much for spending some time with me today, and good luck out there. And thanks for your work.